It's common to mistake an organizational chart for a map of actual power. We assume leverage flows neatly top-down, tied strictly to formal job titles. But power is not a static trait you earn with a promotion. It is a relational dynamic, a processual force that emerges entirely through ongoing interactions. Authority is simply the theoretical right to make a decision. True power is the actual ability to influence outcomes and compel action. You see this distinction most clearly in the complex world of supply chains and procurement networks. A signed contract provides a buyer with legal authority, but the actual balance of power between a buyer and a supplier is hidden deep in the operational details. To uncover who truly holds the cards, we have to look past those legal agreements and analyze the flow of critical resources. Power cannot simply be claimed. It is dictated entirely by the level of dependency one entity has on another. The foundational rule of this dynamic is simple. Organizational power is directly proportional to structural dependency. Dependency relies on two key variables. First, a resource's absolute criticality. Second, the lack of viable alternatives. Let's assign this to two theoretical actors. Actor A is the buying organization, and Actor B is the supplier. Calculating the exact ratio of Actor A's dependency on Actor B against B's dependency on A is the prerequisite for any strategic negotiation. You have to know the math before you sit at the table. This chart shows the power dependency matrix. To understand it, we start with the empty intersection of two axes, the tools strategists use to objectively measure these dependency ratios. The horizontal x-axis charts the relative importance of the buyer's resources, Actor A, to the supplier, Actor B. A high value on this axis looks like a supplier relying on a single mega retailer for 80% of its total annual revenue. That extreme financial dependency carries immense weight, but it represents only half of the structural reality. The vertical y-axis tracks the exact opposite, the relative importance of the supplier's resources to the buyer. You hit a high value here if a buyer requires a highly specialized, patented microchip that no other supplier on Earth manufactures. These two axes interact constantly, fluctuating as market conditions shift and resource scarcity changes over time. Plotting an organizational relationship on this grid reveals one of four distinct structural realities that will dictate every strategic move. We start here, in the bottom left quadrant. This is where both variables, the buyer's need and the supplier's need, are extremely low. In this independent state, relationships are highly transactional. Both parties are dealing in commoditized goods, meaning they can easily substitute each other at a moment's notice. Contrast that with the exact opposite extreme on the grid, where both variables are maxed out. This is the interdependent state, a zone of enforced strategic partnership. Neither party can operate without the other. Interdependence requires deep mutual investment. The two organizations share risks, align long-term goals, and often fully integrate their IT systems to function. Both of these quadrants represent structural symmetry. Because neither party holds clear leverage over the other, aggressive, strong-arm negotiation tactics will inherently fail here. The real tension lies in the asymmetric quadrants, where dependency is entirely one-sided. The top left quadrant represents supplier power. The buyer absolutely needs the supplier's resources to function, but the supplier has plenty of other clients waiting in line. The resulting strategic behavior is highly predictable. A dominant supplier will raise prices, dictate lead times, and deprioritize the desperate buyer's needs. Finally, we reach the bottom right quadrant, where the leverage entirely flips in favor of the purchasing organization. This is buyer power. The supplier's survival relies entirely on the buyer's business, but the buyer has a vast array of alternative sourcing options. In this state, the buyer has the ability to force down prices, demand immediate compliance, and impose strict policy changes on the supplier. Structural asymmetry changes the rules of engagement from negotiation to outright dictation, creating a dangerous temptation for the dominant party. This brings us to the ethical paradox of structural power. Possessing leverage doesn't mean dictating terms is strategically sound. Unchecked dominance carries risks. Squeezing margins fractures the supplier structure, triggering a downward cascade where suppliers become unable to pay living wages or maintain safe conditions. The top-down pressure effectively forces these suppliers into desperate, unsustainable practices just to survive the terms of the contract. The ultimate consequence rebounds directly onto the dominant buyer, manifesting as intense scrutiny from regulatory bodies, media backlash, and a hollowed-out, deeply fragile supply base. Exploiting the buyer-dominant quadrant creates the illusion of short-term financial victory, while mathematically guaranteeing long-term systemic vulnerability. The alternative strategy is to apply your leverage responsibly, to elevate the entire network rather than simply extract from it. A dominant organization can exercise expert power by using its superior resources and knowledge to proactively develop and empower vulnerable suppliers. They can also use referent power to share best practices, incentivizing suppliers to willingly emulate the buyer's high environmental and labor standards. The ultimate purpose of the power dependency matrix is not to identify whom you can exploit. It is a diagnostic tool to reveal the structural reality of your network, so you can engineer sustainable mutual success.